Hi everybody, happy Friday, hope you're all doing well. I am going live today about accountability, and first of all I wanted to say thank you so much for all of your support with the book promotion last week. We got it up to #1 on Amazon, yay! So thank you so much for all the reviews that you wrote, the messages that you posted, sharing everything across LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It was really amazing to get your support, and amazing, actually quite surreal to see this book up in the company of Simon Sinek and Elon Musk and others, and then actually finally on Friday afternoon or Friday evening we got it up to #1. So thank you so much for all your help, and if you don't already have a copy, you can obviously get it on Amazon, but you can get it for a special price of £10 on our website if you haven't already got a copy. So let's get into accountability today. Accountability is all about processes and systems. It's all about getting organised and managing people. And it's actually an area that a lot of people find challenging. It's obviously a huge topic. So today I'm going to do 3 things. Firstly, I'm just going to say a few words around the topic and how I understand and define accountability. Then I'll tackle the questions that you post in advance, so thank you so much. And then finally, for any of you that are watching, if you have any burning thoughts or questions, then we'll tackle them during this live. So hopefully that sounds good. Hi Sophia, thank you for joining. Right, so I'm going to get straight into it. So accountability is one of the pillars of the real model that we use with our clients. If you think of resilience as the heart of your business, and then energy is like the lifeblood running all around your business, accountability is really the skeleton, the structure that holds the business together, and leadership is really the force that drives it. So that's the real model in 30 seconds or less. And most people think of accountability actually as taking ownership, and I hear from a lot of business owners and entrepreneurs that I speak to that they really wish that their people would take more ownership and take a step up and share the load. So accountability is really that ownership, as well as those systems and processes, and I think that's why a lot of people find it particularly challenging. So what stops people taking that ownership often, I find, is if your organisation is confusing, if people aren't really clear about who's doing what, if there are overlapping roles and responsibilities, tasks within your business. That lack of clarity leads to people often sort of taking a step back and saying, well, I'm not going to take ownership because I'm not really clear about who's doing what. The other thing that stops people taking that is being out of their flow. You'll hear a lot more about that over the coming weeks, but if you're not really in your flow, in your zone, doing the things where you add the most value, that will also stop you feeling like you can take ownership. The really important thing about accountability is you can't give it. It can only be taken. So we've got a question about that coming up, but I'll just invite you to think about that a little bit. Accountability is something I can say I will take on the accountability for that, but you can't give it to me. You can't give it to anybody else. So it's about how can you get your people and yourself to take accountability for what they're doing. So I'm going to get on to your questions now, and thank you so much for posting those. So Nikki asked, will you be sharing a recording? And yes, we will. We're going to make this a video available to those of you that haven't been able to join at this time. It's always difficult getting a good time for everybody, so I'll invite your feedback in terms of what is a good time. I know some of you voted in the poll, but let's make sure we get a time that works for the majority of the people, and we'll always record these sessions so that you can watch them afterwards. So Graham, great question. How do you make people accountable and kick set-in habits? So the first part first, as I've already said, you actually can't make people accountable. So this word accountability always gets muddled up between responsibility and accountability. So you can give somebody the responsibility for doing something, but you ultimately, if you do that, you retain the accountability, which basically means if the shit hits the fan, people are going to look at you. The only way that accountability is transferred is if the other person says, I take on the ownership of this task, of seeing this through. So it's really, I think of it as like a relay race, a baton. Have you actually handed over the baton, or have you just asked or told somebody to do something? There's a big difference. I always say management is not about telling people, it's actually more about asking people. So, for example, if you're designing somebody's job description, a really good way of doing it, rather than going, here's your job description, is to have a conversation with somebody and say, why don't you, based on our conversation, why don't you write down what you think your key responsibilities are, and then let's discuss it. So you're asking the other person to define and therefore commit what they are going to do. And that's a much more powerful way than saying, here, I'm going to tell you what to do. So asking people what to do is a much more powerful way of managing people than tell them. Ask them what they're going to deliver. I'm a huge fan of regular one-to-ones with your people, and that's a key question to ask in that one-to-one. What have you achieved last week, and what are you going to achieve the next week? So that people are taking responsibility and ultimately taking accountability for what they're going to deliver. I think being really clear as well. When we delegate, in the book I do a whole thing about that, and I think that we've actually shared in the community I think it's 7 steps of delegation, so it's 7 different ways of delegating. So there's a big difference between will you do this exactly like this in this way? That's kind of what I would call delegation light, and at the other end of the scale there's the full-on delegation, which is I want you to get here to this outcome, you figure it out, and I'm here if you need me or if you need any support. They're 2 very different things, and they're ends of the same spectrum, and then there's lots of things in between. So I think getting really clear yourself about how much of it you're delegating. Are you telling somebody where you want them to get to? Are you telling them how to get there? What points do you want to be involved? What points do you want them to come and check with you? Do you need to have a sign-off? For example, in financial matters, you might want to review something before it goes out, or a contract, etc. So you might say, please will you draft this up, and then I'll have a look at it, and then you can send it out. So I think being really clear about where your involvement is and where it isn't is really critical. What I would say as a general rule is more junior people, you need to give them more guidance. The more you want people to step up, and the more you want to consider them as a senior person, or you want them to consider themselves as a senior person, being clear about the outcome rather than this is how I want you to do it is a much better way. Generally speaking, treating people like adults rather than children works better in my experience. So focusing on outcomes rather than on how. So I was just looking down at a couple of notes that I've made. One of the things about accountability as well is in meetings. So that's obviously a huge topic in its own right, and we could have a live about that at some point. But going back to the point about accountability, you should never, ever assign tasks to somebody that is not in a meeting. That is the opposite of accountability, effectively. So if you're having a meeting with people and we decide that Jack needs to do something, if Jack is not in the room, somebody in the room needs to take accountability for going to Jack and saying, please will you do this, and giving him the responsibility. And then at the next meeting, when we say, well, has Jack done that thing? And we're looking around the table and going, well, Jack's not here, we don't know. The person who has taken on that accountability for speaking to Jack is the one that we're holding accountable. So that's really key as well. So the second part of your question, Graham, was around set-in habits. So I'm quite interested to know what you mean by that. And I think it's always good to have an open and honest conversation with people, to say, do you want me looking over your shoulder and telling you what to do, or are you going to commit to me in terms of what you are going to do? Right, so I'm going to move on to Anish's question. So Anish, thank you for your question. What he asked was, he said, as a one-man band, my question is, how can I consistently hold myself accountable? So that's a great question, and I've got a few thoughts about that. First, be really clear about what you want to achieve. Second, I find separate out the decision making from the actual activity. A lot of us get really stuck with, oh, do I feel like doing this now? What, shall I do it? Shall I not? Take the decision separately. I find that last thing at night, I like to or last thing at the end of my day, I should say, not last thing at night. At the end of my day, I like to say, what do I want to achieve tomorrow? Maybe put it in my diary. I want to exercise, or I want to achieve this, I want to make this phone call. Actually put it in my diary, so that when it comes to it, it's already decided. You don't have to think about it. Famously, people like Steve Jobs, and today Mark Zuckerberg, even Barack Obama, you see them wearing the same clothes every day, and that's why they do it. They're just taking away that decision. It's called decision fatigue. So put it in your diary, write a list. I actually have colourful post-it notes that I use if I'm going to have a day at home, that I write down, these are the things that I want to get achieved, and then it's great because you can scrunch each one up after you've achieved whatever you've set yourself. But definitely separate the decision from the doing. That certainly makes it easier in terms of holding yourself accountable. The other thing I would say is, it's great to hold yourself accountable, but even better to ask other people to hold you accountable. Chapter 1 in my book is all about support, and that includes asking for help. And that's a great thing about a community like this. One of the reasons why we ask you to tell us what your weekly goals are on a Monday is so that we can hold you accountable, is so that we can ask you how it's going and how you've got on with that. There's something really powerful about saying to the world, I am going to do this week. And if you do it in a community like this, where we've all got our challenges with our businesses, and building a team, and scaling up, and putting processes in place, and all the good things that we have to deal with in our business. So let's hold each other accountable, and let's do more of that in this community. So yes, by all means, hold yourself accountable, but ask for help. That's one of the hardest things often about being a business owner, particularly when you start out or you're a one-man band, as you said. So use this community. That's absolutely what we're here for. So I'm going to move on now to Bradley's question. Hi Bradley, thank you very much. So you wrote a tough one regarding subcontractors brackets builders, and I'm not sure if that's a question or you're making some kind of statement. For those of you that haven't been introduced to Bradley, he's a letting agent and also a developer based up in Leeds. And so it's really back to what I was saying in response to Graham's question. It is challenging. I have a lot of experience of dealing with builders and with subcontractors, and it can be challenging. I think again it's about asking them to commit to what they're going to do. Talk about communication, about how you want them to communicate to you. Things move around, there's always a different priority, but explaining very clearly what your requirements are and what you find acceptable is going to help. And ultimately, it's finding people that you can rely on, that are not going to let you down, because the fact that another job has slipped is really not your problem, but often I find that subcontractors can try and make it your problem. So it's about you being really clear about what is acceptable and what isn't. Not sure if I answered your question, not sure if it was a question, but that's my thoughts on subcontractors. So Johnny, hi Johnny, thank you for posting your question. His question is, how do you prioritise like a pro? Great question. Again, also like a niche, accountability to oneself. How do you set and commit to valuable goals? So my thoughts on that is that I find that being structured about your goals can really, really help. And that absolutely means having a plan. So for example, working with a coach or mentor to get really clear about what your plan is and what your long-term goals are, and then breaking that down into annual goals and 90-day goals and even shorter. I mean, I find 90-day goals can really, really help. And then once you've got that clear, then it's head down and stop asking yourself the question, stop second guessing. So if in this quarter you've decided to focus on getting more prospects, everything you do has to be focused on that, and don't make the decision every day about what am I prioritizing. The question is, does this activity lead me to get more prospects? If you really have a strong sense that you have to change course, I'm not saying you have to wait till the end of 90 days, but try and resist the urge and that all those distractions that are going to take you off course. I've made my decision, this quarter I'm focusing on generating more prospects, or I have made it my goal this month or this quarter to find a business partner, or to find my first employee or my next member of my team. And that is what I'm focusing on. So everything I do is really focused on that. I think what I said to Anish as well about separating the decision making from the doing, I find it really helps a lot of people, especially with things that they're putting off that they know they should do. I spoke to a lady last week and she said that she really finds making telephone calls really difficult. So she puts it in her diary, and I asked her, have you thought about what time of day you're going to have the right energy to make calls if you find that difficult? So I think being aware of your own energy and your own profile and how you're wired, and planning things out in advance so that you've made the decision, can be really, really helpful. I've noticed a few other people have joined. Hi guys, good to have you here. Please feel free to ping up your questions if there's anything else that is burning in your mind around accountability, getting organised and managing people. So what else have we got here then? Just finishing off on Johnny's question then, I think being aware of what your day looks like and when is a good time to make decisions, it is something to think about, so that you're not asking yourself all the way through, am I doing the right thing? Questioning, second guessing. We all have that voice in our head from time to time that is not particularly helpful and leads us to second guess ourselves. So that's why I would definitely advise separating out the decision making from the actual doing, so that when I do it last thing at the end of my working day, because then I wake up in the morning when I'm freshest, and you might be the other way around, but I'm freshest in the morning, and I'm like, right, I've got my post-it notes, I've got my calendar, I know what I'm doing, I know what calls I'm doing, I know what I've said to myself I'm going to do, and then I can just power on through. If you're out and about with customers, I think also using your calendar, I've said that I'm going to have a break between this call and this call, or between this meeting and this meeting, I'm going to get these things done, or I'm going to give myself a little bit of a break and walk around in the sunshine in the park. But it's about being intentional about it in advance, and then just not asking yourself the question. That is exhausting, constantly reprioritizing and constantly asking yourself the question. So a good way to hold yourself accountable is to make decisions up front. And what I said to Anish is use this group or other groups, tell people, you might be one for social media, post it on Facebook, today I'm going to do this, or this week I'm going to do this, or tell your friends, tell this group that's exactly what we're here for. Let us hold you accountable. It's amazing once you put it out there in the world, and then you're like, oh, I've told people I better do it now. So they are my thoughts on accountability. It's a huge topic, and I'm sure we'll be returning to areas of accountability in future sessions. Please put your comments below. Tell me what you found helpful. Tell me what you would have wished that I had spoken about, or anything else that is not clear. And please post in the community on Monday. Please tell us what your goals are for next week, and let us hold you accountable. So I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day, and I really hope that you have a lovely weekend. Take care, bye.